Well, look at that, new camera angle, and that's because I am sitting on a bench seat, which is finally installed because my bed to bench layout is all in. So let me show you how I got here. Hi, I'm Ellie, and this is my 2007 Toyota Hiace, which I am self-converting into a camper van for van life. I'm about 2/3 of the way through the conversion with plenty more videos to come, so if you want to be a part of this journey, then click that subscribe button. I'm Ellie Wilder, and you're watching Wilder in Motion. So the first and most important thing to do is measure the van, and I worked out that I could pretty much have two 60cm sections at the side with a 50cm aisle. I decided one side would be a 60cm couch/bench, and then the other side would be a 30cm dining bench with a 30cm storage cabinet behind it. One thing I've learned as part of my van conversion is it is impossible to measure every single little nook and crevice of the van. It's really hard to account for things like the angle, so it is good to have at least one measurement that's open to a bit of variation so that you don't get caught out when it goes to actually installing everything, as we learnt with the wardrobe. So for this one, it happened to be this cabinet at the back, which I saved to do at the end. I made these frames using recycled wood for some old pallets, and as I've spoken about in previous videos, I'm sealing all of my wood in some form, and for this particular thing I used some paint. And this is hopefully going to reduce the amount of humidity that it absorbs, and that's going to decrease the movement in the wood and also reduce the risk of mold. I attached the pieces of my frame using some liquid nails and some heavy duty staples. To support the frames, I also used some recycled wood, which I painted as well. The legs of my bed frame are 40cm high, the frame that goes on top is approximately 2cm, and then the cushion that I'm planning on using as a mattress is around 12cm. Given that the cushion is going to compact, this means my seated height is going to be around 50cm, which is a comfortable height that I measured for myself. I attached the legs to the bed frame using a method I'm going to refer to very often in my furniture making: pre-drill, countersink, glue, and screw. In the end, I decided not to box out my wheel arches as it's mainly an aesthetic thing and mine are going to be inside my cupboards. Also, one of the legs of my bed frame lands right on top of the wheel arch, so I figured this is quite a sturdy base to have the leg on. This of course meant that I did need to trim down that leg to suit. With the bed frames built, I was ready to install them in the van. I started by putting the 60cm bed frame right up against the wall. Now, I wanted to make sure that these were really secure and they weren't going to come loose from the vibration, so that's why I decided to first of all stick things down with liquid nails, and then to make sure things were really attached, I used brackets and 4 screws to attach everything so that it was very firmly anchored into the plywood subfloor, which I installed in a previous video. I then measured my 50cm aisle and lined up my 30cm bed frame so that it was up against the aisle. Then whatever space I had left between the wall and the bed frame became my storage cabinet. So then I measured up the cabinet area and it ended up being 23cm wide, which goes back to what I said about leaving a measurement variable. The van is actually 170cm at the floor, but clearly some of this width has been lost along the way. So I'm really glad that I saved the measurements of this cupboard and getting this wood cut until the end. This is melamine, also known as particle board or chipboard, because it is made out of large wood chips. That means that it doesn't quite get the same smooth edge as MDF, and the larger wood chips give it greater structural integrity. It's not as likely to bend and snap as MDF, and it's also not as susceptible to water. I went with this laminated version as well because I'm trying to keep everything sealed. I got it cut at Bunnings to my measurements. I definitely recommend getting stuff professionally cut wherever you can. It's pretty cheap to get it cut on site at Bunnings. It saves so much time and it makes sure that the cuts are actually straight as well. And then it means that I only have to go in and cut just the little curves to fit into the van and paint everything to seal it in. I waited to anchor down the 30cm bed frame until I had this cupboard installed so that I knew that there would be enough width. There's nothing worse than having pieces cut to size, putting in the narrow bench seat, and then finding out that actually I positioned the bench seat 1 centimeter too close to the wall and now the cabinet won't fit. So it's always good in the van to work from the outside in, because you can always push things in more and make the aisle narrower, and you probably won't notice too much, but you can't just create extra space on the outside. So once again, I pre-drilled, countersank, glued and screwed to secure this cabinet in place, and I also used a couple of brackets to attach it to the wall. Then I anchored down the smaller bed frame using the same method as I'd used for the larger one. At the moment it's open at the top, but when I get to my kitchen there will be the bench top here. I'm either going to have just a little bench top covering it that will lift up on a hinge, or I might make the bench top go the whole way and have the option of lifting that as well. The purpose of this long narrow storage cupboard is to fit bigger or bulkier kind of awkward items, so I could lie down something like a camping chair in here or a collapsible beach tent, but this is not the only storage. There is plenty underneath as well, and this needs to be secured while I'm driving, so I made some cupboard doors. I also used melamine for the cupboard doors, and I also got these pre-cut at Bunnings. So I decided to add a bit of colour to the van by painting over the laminate with this beautiful green colour called Dublin Jack. I chose this colour because my van's called Arcadia. It means idyllic wilderness. This whole thing is about adventuring in nature, and I feel like this green colour really speaks to nature. I'll be using this colour throughout the van, and I'm accenting it with some gold, and that's why I chose these brass handles to go on the doors as well. Now, these aren't your typical cupboards, so I can't use typical hinges. It's a little hard to explain, but if you think about your kitchen cupboards, the door sits inside the wall and then the hinge springs outwards. But because in my van, the doors are sitting on the outside of the base of the cabinet, and the frame is a lot thicker than just the typical wall of your kitchen cupboard, the usual hinges won't do. I ended up going with a version of a butt hinge, but they have this bit cut out that makes them a bit slimmer. And this saved me the hassle of chiseling out a gap for the hinge. I tried to keep the bench to bed conversion as simple as possible, and I saw someone else do this method where you open up the cupboard doors and then you just pull out the piece of wood, it covers over the aisle, and then you have your bed. However, for this method to work, the doors do need to be sitting on the floor, otherwise the hinge is going to be taking all of the weight. So I made sure I put some heavy duty fabric glued and tacked onto the base of the cupboard doors. This conversion method was a little easier said than done when it came to installing the doors. Because I needed them to sit against the floor so that they would take the weight when it was in bed mode, it was a little difficult to make sure I was still able to open the door, and this is because my van is used so the floor isn't completely flat. So sometimes if I had it against the floor in the closed position, it actually couldn't even open very far because the floor was getting higher in that area. So I had to play a little bit of a game of giving the hinges enough giving them that I could still open them, but also making sure it wasn't scuffing the floor, but it wasn't too high off the floor, so there wasn't too much pressure on the hinges. It certainly was a lot of fiddling around. So much for simplifying things, but we got there in the end. It's also important that the doors don't just fly open the second I drive off, and so I used a simple method of spring-loaded catches. I attached one side to the frame and one side to the door. This means it just takes a little bit of a tug to get things open and then a press to snap things back closed again. This is a nice simple method that I feel sure will still hold even if there's some pressure behind it from something sliding around in the cupboard as I'm driving, and it seems like a more secure method than something like a magnetic closure. I pretty much just repeated this with the doors on the other bed frame. Frames, check. Storage unit, check. Cupboard doors, check. There's one thing missing, and that's what I'm actually sitting on. And on this side, it's just some simple melamine board, the exact same stuff that this is. I got it cut at the same time. So again, I pre-drilled, countersank, glued and screwed to attach this piece. As for the other side, I wanted something a bit more structural, so I went with some 9mm structural plywood, the same stuff that I used for the subfloor. Just like with the subfloor, I painted this to seal it in. In my design video, my concept was to have the two pieces of wood, one sitting on the bed frame, one leaning on the wall, attached with a hinge and held in place using some gate closure kind of things. And then once they were undone, I just slide the whole thing forward, and the middle piece covers the aisle and this piece covers the bed frame. So to accommodate this, I secured some of the same fabric from the bottom of the cupboard doors onto the touch points of the wood so that it wouldn't be splintering against each other as I'm doing this sliding motion. However, once I got to installing, I realized that the wall was too curved that actually the second I undid whatever the anchoring point would be, it would just fall on top. All of the cushions would fly out, and even though I could still pull it across and then unfold it, kind of defeats the point of having this one motion system where the cushions just stay in place. So instead I decided just to flip everything around and just do the classic lift up the cushions and then fold out the middle section like a lot of other people do. So that's not ideal, but it probably is easier than kind of yanking things across. I have seen some people use drawer sliders. That just wasn't going to work for my situation, but I am satisfied that the result is going to work. And speaking of the cushions, I have got my mattress, so shortly I will be cutting that and making some custom covers to match in with my whole color scheme. I hope you found this video interesting or informative or entertaining. It's so great to have you guys on my van life journey with me and following along as my van build takes shape. Hopefully next week I will get onto my wardrobe, and in the meantime, thank you so much for watching, and if you want to stay updated, make sure you like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.